All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be breaking down our reaction to Tyler Buchner transferring from Notre Dame to Alabama, reunites with Tommy Rees. First, we're going to talk about this offense for a second, and then Buchner as a player and the impact he potentially may have with the Tide, and then Nick will add some intel on why they made this move, considering between Carly. Tommy Rees, though, Nick, this is a guy that's going to come over and bring a lot of 12 personnel. Sam Hartman, of course, went to Notre Dame, beat out Tyler Buchner. I'm glad that he stuck around and competed for that position, didn't get it, and then he went to find something elsewhere. Pretty admirable, I'd say, today in college football. You don't see that really at all. This is a scheme that's going to, include a handful of RPOs. Mainly, this is a check-down passing game, at least at Notre Dame. Obviously, Alabama has a lot more weapons to utilize. We're going to see, those concepts that Tommy Rees has in store that get vertical, running back screens, tight ends. And I do think that, again, that we're going to see a lot more openness with this offense as they come over to Alabama. Notre Dame, though, they only had 4 passing plays of 40-plus yards. That was 117th in college football. Again, the personnel was not really a strong suit at wide receiver, so I think we're going to see a very more so creative offense here. And then, Nick, Tyler Buchner, though, this was kind of expected, a day or two ago when he entered the portal. This is a guy that was the starter last year. He only played the first 2 games, got hurt, returned for the Gator Bowl against South Carolina. Looked pretty solid against Ohio State. It was awful against Marshall, and he was, pretty average, I would say, against South Carolina. The scouting report on this guy, he has good speed for his size. He was always touted as a good runner, and, especially with this size of 6'1", 215. He's kind of like a Tim Tebow comparison, because he uses his arms, has broad shoulders. His best attribute is when it comes to throwing the football, I thought he did a good job in the game against South Carolina, throwing to the boundary of touch. He seems like a patient player overall, especially when it comes to letting runs develop. He made some really good throws in that game with rushers in his face mask, against South Carolina. Decision-making and vision certainly weren't great. He had 2 interceptions against Marshall. They were just flat-out awful. Showcased bad timing and accuracy on 2 curl routes. One of them ended up being a game-sealing pick 6 and that awful loss to Marshall at home. And then one against South Carolina late in the game. They have a chance to go up 2 scores and put it away. He's throwing into the end zone. Does not see the linebacker who ends up hauling it 100-plus yards for the game-tying score. I think Tyler Buchner is a guy that has a lot of potential, Nick, the guy from Lajales, California. He was a high-end 4-star recruit, 71st ranked overall in the class of 2021. This is a guy I followed for a long time. What's your immediate reaction to him coming over to Alabama?
This is definitely an interesting move here for the Crimson Tide. The ties make a lot of sense. As soon as he entered the portal, right, people in Alabama were saying this would make a lot of sense. He visited Tuscaloosa very quickly. He was on campus just a day after entering the portal. His former coordinator, Tommy,
now the offensive coordinator at Alabama.
Alabama was previously recruiting him out of high school. They offered him when he was at high school, a high-level high school recruit, like we just discussed. So I don't hate the move a lot here at all. I think this is a talented quarterback that has a lot of potential. The small sample size at Notre Dame was not great. 55.4% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Of course, again, this is a very small sample size. When I watch the film, I am a fan of what I see on the ground, right? 36 carries for 123 yards, 4 touchdowns. Again, small sample size, but that's a solid number there. 2 touchdowns in the win against South Carolina on the ground, 3 touchdowns passing in the Gator Bowl. He won Gator Bowl MVP, which is, certainly a nice honor to get. That South Carolina team gave Notre Dame all they could in what was a really underrated bowl game matchup. Solid battle there in the Gator Bowl. He also played well against Ohio State. I think people forget that game was a lot closer than it probably should have been. Ohio State really should have taken off and blown out Notre Dame there, but they really kept it close in Columbus. Tough atmosphere to be playing, getting your first career start. So I definitely think there's a lot of attributes I like there. He was 10 of 18 for 177 in that game. No touchdowns, no interceptions. Got sacked a few times, carried the ball on the ground a couple of times. But I think this is a solid quarterback, and it kind of adds a new wrinkle to this quarterback battle here in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, it would be safe to assume that Nick Saban and Tommy Rees do not like what they have currently in Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson if they're going to make a move like this in the portal late in the season. I think this is a very interesting move to bring a guy like Buchner in, even if he isn't going to be the starter. He has potential certainly here working with his former coordinator, and he's going to have a lot more talent to work with the wide receiving talent here. I went to A-Day, the spring game. I was impressed with the wide receiving talent. The speed looked good this year. Some of these guys have gotten better in the offseason. So I certainly think this could be a good fit for Tyler Buchner, and it could be a good fit for Alabama long term.
Since 2016, Alabama has had no problem at the quarterback position. They had Jalen Hurts, then it went to Tua, and then the Bryce Young. So it's been very easy. Nick Saban's not had to make any decisions really one bit when it comes to this position or group. But currently, like you said, Milroe, Simpson, they've been kind of unimpressive, I guess, so far. I want you to add some intel on that in a second. But, this is not something Nick Saban really has ever done. It brings in a quarterback from the transfer portal that's going to compete for the starting position, especially a guy following his coordinator. It just seems very un-Alabama-like. But this is kind of concerning that he wants to go ahead and do this, because we both kind of had some good praise for Simpson and Milroe. I think in their own right have had some impressive moments in spring ball. Is this concerning to you from Nick Saban's standpoint, or do you think he's just trying to up the competition a little bit?
I think this is concerning. It definitely worries me a little bit. But this is a new age of college football. Moves like this do happen a lot more often than we're used to. So I think there is a grand plan here that will make a lot of sense. This is not something we're used to in Alabama. There aren't a whole lot of, quarterback battles. Like you said, it was pretty obvious over the past couple of seasons where, it went from Tua to Mac to Bryce Young, and
true quarterback battle since
Jay Coker and Cooper Bateman battled it out in the 2015 season. That was a battle that kind of went down towards the end of it. Jay Coker eventually, being the one to lead the charge and winning a national championship at Alabama. A smart move there from Saban. In the era of the portal, these are obviously things that are going to happen. They're going to bring in guys that transfer. If you don't like what you have, you can always hit the portal and try and find someone. I personally, I wasn't blown away by Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson during the spring game. I thought Milroe looked better, but of course it's a spring game, small sample size, and of course I figured that Nick Saban would be inclined to in favor of the incumbent here in Milroe, who would be the incumbent starter in situation. Of course, he played in the Texas A&M game last year, so I figured that was the direction Alabama was going to go. But again, they must be seeing something behind the scenes they don't like if they're going to make a move like this.
Now, I do want to kind of compare this to when they had Jalen Hurts. His first 2 years, he wasn't the most polished passer, and obviously he's developed greatly into the second highest. But you bring it back to that year, because that's exactly what they have right now. It's three guys that are pretty impressive with their legs. Buchner, that's his best attribute. Milroe, a great runner, exceptional speed. He does have that big arm, but again, this is a guy who struggled with accuracy and confidence in his small sample size. Seemed like a very panic thrower. Ty Simpson, he played in the spread option in high school. He made a lot of great plays on his feet. Running that offense, of course, allows you to develop, good technicalities like, feet, quickness, football IQ, and running the football. Seems like we have three very similar style quarterbacks here. What do you think is going to be the game plan now that we have, of course, 5 quarterbacks in this QB room? Do you think there's going to be any type of game plan shift for Saban and Bama, or do you think they're just going to eventually work this out? Because Buchner, of course, he played at that passing attack in Notre Dame, did not have great talent outside of Michael Mayer. We have a pretty deep receiving core full of speed and skill for Alabama. Do you think that's going to be ideally the goal, just to try and continue to spread it out, kind of like the Mac Jones era? Or do you think we're going to see more of a balanced attack due to these kind of constraints at quarterback?
So it's definitely an interesting move to consider here, right? So obviously these three quarterbacks are all very similar skill set, especially with their legs. You would think that Ty Simpson is probably the more passer pocket ready of the bunch, but there is no true pocket passer in this group here. Of course, they're all got the talent with their legs as the game's kind of evolved. I think Nick Saban will start to adjust the offense a little bit. I think they're going to have to settle on a quarterback they fit, gives them the best chance to win now, and someone that can be able to be involved in the offense. I think if Buchner can show it in practice over the next couple of months that he has the best chance to lead this team, I think he's going to get the nod. And they're going to have to try and adjust the offense here. Of course, Tommy Rees, new offensive coordinator, that helps with that, right? They're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, bringing new offensive game plan, new style, so certainly can help with that adjustment, which will be a tough adjustment for this Alabama team. I think Nick Saban's got a process here. I think he's going to trust his process, and he's going to find his starter. But I think, we're going to obviously see people transfer out at some point. And this is a tough battle now. It was a two-headed race, and now it's a three-headed race with adding Buchner in. So it certainly adds a lot of intrigue here in Tuscaloosa. We don't really see things like this, and a lot of
which direction they're going to go. If I know Nick Saban,
he's not going to tip his hand until week 1. We probably won't know our starter until we get really close to game time, week 1 against Middle Tennessee State. So I really think that's a very interesting battle, and they're going to have to wait some time here to figure out what's going to be going on.
And that leads us to who we think will be the predicted starter. I'm going to go ahead and say Tyler Buchner is going to be the starter. I think that he's going to come into here. They quickly, obviously, were able to lure him here because they must have promised him something. Like, playing time must certainly be on the table, because you left being a backup to Sam Hartman to going and battling two guys that are pretty neck and neck for the QB position. I think Buchner is probably going to be the starter here because he understands the offense, pretty solid fit. And if they're going to, opt to have a quarterback who can run the football primarily, I don't see why Buchner would not be it. This is a former lacrosse player. He's got plenty of speed. I love his confidence on the ground. Again, kind of a Tim Tebow-like comparison. I think if he could play for an entire season, a lot of people would make that comparison as well. Who do you think is going to be the starter, Nick? Because this is kind of a frustrating QB battle at this point because we're both kind of certainly disappointed with what we saw in the spring because I had high expectations for these two guys, at least when it comes to development in a short amount of time. But I'm very confused on what's going on right now in Tuscaloosa. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the safe bet and say Tyler Buchner is gonna be the starter.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also confused and upset as an Alabama fan. This is not exactly what you want to see. Things have not gone quite great the past 2 seasons, losing the national championship to Georgia, and this past season not making the playoff. And you're really hoping that Nick Saban kind of steady the ship here, bring in a new coordinator, a lot of optimism with new coordinators. But then you have this just quarterback battle. It seems to be falling apart. It's really not a good sign when you have to grab a guy out of the portal. We're almost in May here, and we're grabbing guys out of the portal to play quarterback. I'm going to agree with you. I think Buckner's going to get the nod. You don't make this move unless you're grabbing a starter. I just don't see you picking up a quarterback that's not going to be your starting quarterback out of the portal right now. You gotta think this guy has potential to be your number one. If you're going to make a move like this so late in the season, we heard Florida was interested in making a move in the portal for a quarterback. Other schools potentially interested. They're not making that move because they have a starter, right? They're making that move because they need to find a starter here. I think Tyler Buchner is a solid quarterback. I think he can start, certainly. I'm not thrilled, right? I think none of these options have really blown me away so far. Ty Simpson was the guy that I really thought had the best potential going into the offseason, but he has not shown me anything in spring ball in the practice I've seen and or at the spring game to prove that he should be the starter. Jalen Monroe has improved so far. I've seen better from his arm, better accuracy, a little bit better in the pocket, good control on the ball, but I also think that he just need a little more work here. Tyler Buchner is the best plug-and-play option currently, so I think with Tommy Rees calling the plays, a lot more talent, a wide receiver. He's got good tight end talent here in Tuscaloosa as well. I think Tyler Buchner can succeed here in Alabama.
I definitely think at the end of the day they're going to be just fine, but I think about 3,000 passing yards, whoever the starter is kind of going to be the cap, I think, on 2023. It's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.